Hi everyone. Many of you may be thinking that we can now sit back and relax as the majority of the COVID-19 restrictions have been lifted. I would implore you to think otherwise. It is quite likely that this is nothing more than a short reprieve in the plan for control and power. However, it is also an opportunity for those of us who stand on the side of freedom to start being proactive rather than reactive. With that in mind, I want to briefly discuss 3 topics with you today. The first is an Irish lobby campaign asking you to write to your TDs to ask them to vote no to the extension of the COVID-19 emergency power laws before the 31st of March 2022. The second is an EU lobby campaign asking you to write to Irish MEP'S asking them to vote no to a proposed 12-month extension to the EU digital certificate for travel. And the third is to inform you that the World Health Assembly, which is the forum through which the WHO is governed by its 194 member states, including Ireland, intends to create an agreement which will stipulate how member states and other countries must fight pandemics into the future. So first we will look at the Irish lobby campaign. As you will be aware, on the 22nd of January 2022, all COVID-19 restrictions enacted under the Health and Criminal Justice COVID-19 Amendment No. 2 Act 2021, with the exception of face coverings, were revoked through Statutory Instrument 27 of 2022. The Health and Criminal Justice Act is due to expire on the 31st of March 2022 unless extended by both houses of the Oireachtas. We need to make sure that this piece of legislation is not extended past the 31st of March, so we are asking you once again to lobby your TDs. If this piece of legislation is not extended, all laws around lockdowns, closure of businesses, face masks, fines and penalties and domestic vaccine passports will expire, and if the government want to reintroduce any such laws again, they would have to bring a new bill both through the Dáil and thereafter the Seanad. To date, many TDs have stated that they will be guided by the public health advice in relation to the extension of any COVID-19 legislation. Because the public health advice has called for the lifting of nearly all COVID-19 restrictions, it will be very difficult for any TD to justify voting in favour of this extension, meaning that this is the perfect time to lobby your TDs. Don't expect someone else to do it because they won't. The only incentive for a TD to vote against this extension before the 31st of March is your persistence. So please start emailing and phoning them today. In the description box of this video, you will find a template letter that you can use to lobby all TDs. Please share this campaign to ensure these laws are not extended. The second issue we wanted to discuss is the extension of the EU Digital Green Certificate to the 30th of June 2023, noting that this regulation was due to expire at the end of June 2022. This is the regulation that has been used to restrict travel across the EU unless the person is vaccinated, recently recovered or tests negative for COVID-19. I, for one, don't intend to travel outside of Ireland for the foreseeable future, and I expect this is likely the case for many of you too. If that is the case, you might ask yourself why we need to worry about the extension of this regulation. The reason we need to worry is because the longer this regulation remains in place, the more normalised disclosing private medical information becomes, and it also leaves open the door for governments to reintroduce the vaccine pass for domestic use. With regard to the extension of the EU Digital Certificate, the European Parliament published its proposal in this regard on the 3rd of February 2022. I will briefly highlight some of the important statements made in this proposal. Since its adoption, the EU Digital Certificate has been successfully rolled out across the Union, with more than 1 billion certificates issued by the end of 2021. Almost all member states also use the EU Digital Certificate for domestic purposes, with studies estimating that its use has resulted in increased vaccine uptake. By the 31st of January 2022, the 3 non-EU European Economic Area countries, Switzerland and 29 other third countries and territories are connected to the EU Digital Certificate system, with more expected to join in the future. The EU Digital Certificate system has been recognised as one of the key digital solutions to restore international mobility, with the International Air Transport Association urging countries to adopt the EU Digital Certificate as the global standard. This proposal seeks to extend the EU digital certificate for 12 months and to also introduce some further measures, such as allowing those who are engaged in COVID-19 vaccine trials to receive a COVID-19 digital certificate, which would mean that people who have received a placebo vaccine would also get the certificate, acknowledging once again that nothing COVID-related needs to make sense. In this regard, the proposal states, for this purpose, persons participating in clinical trials that have been approved by Member States' ethical committees and competent authorities should be able to receive an EU digital certificate. These may be issued by Member States where the dose is administered, regardless of whether the participants have received the COVID-19 vaccine candidate or the dose administered to the control group to avoid undermining the studies. In relation to using the digital certificate for domestic use, the proposal states, the Commission does not propose to extend the scope of Regulation 221/953 as far as the domestic use of EU digital certificates is concerned. As noted in Recital 48 of the regulation, Member States may process personal data contained in the EU digital certificate for other purposes if the legal basis for the processing of such data for other purposes, including the related retention period, is provided for in national law, which must comply with Union data protection law. The regulation thus neither prescribes nor prohibits the domestic use of EU digital certificates, which remains within the remit of Member States. I hope this statement alone gives you enough motivation to lobby your MEPs. When the EU digital certificate was voted through the European Parliament in April 2021, every MEP, every politician, every mainstream media outlet said it would never be used for domestic purposes. But now you have the European Parliament telling you in an official document that the EU digital certificate regulation does not prohibit the use of the COVID pass for domestic use. You might also recall that some of the earlier quotes that I read out confirmed that the European Parliament want the EU digital certificate to become the global standard as they continue to get more countries and territories connected to the system. Does that really sound like a short-term plan to you? The proposal further confirms that the Commission did not carry out an impact assessment of the proposal because it has limited scope. I would wholly disagree. Probably the most galling part of the proposal is the statement that the regulation positively affects the fundamental right of freedom of movement and residence under Article 45 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. This is a complete manipulation of language, with the suggestion being that freedom is enhanced through the use of the EU digital certificate as it facilitates travel rather than restricts it. In order to extend the period of operation of the EU digital certificate until June 2023, members of the European Parliament will have to vote to pass it in the majority before the 30th of June 2022. So we are asking you to write to Irish MEPs today to ask them to vote no to any such extension. In the description box of this video, you will find a template letter that you can use to lobby all Irish MEPs, noting that there are 13 Irish MEPs in total, including Mick Wallace, Claire Daly, Grace O'Sullivan, Sean Kelly, Billy Kelleher, Deirdre Clune, Maria Walsh, Colin Markey, Chris McManus, Luke Ming Flanagan, Francis Fitzgerald, Kieran Cuff and Barry Andrews. It is worth noting that the only Irish MEPs that we are aware of who voted against the introduction of the EU digital certificate in 2021 were Mick Wallace and Claire Daly. Even if you never intend to travel outside of Ireland again, this regulation will still affect you, as it is likely that it will be specifically used into the future as a domestic vaccine passport in Ireland and other countries. For this reason, I am asking you to please write to MEPs today to tell them to vote no to this extension. The third and final issue we wanted to discuss is a proposal by the World Health Assembly to create an international treaty, which would likely have the weight of law, stipulating how member states and other countries would be required to fight pandemics into the future. On the 1st of December 2021, the WHO stated, "In a consensus decision aimed at protecting the world from future infectious diseases crises, the World Health Assembly today agreed to kickstart a global process to draft and negotiate a convention, agreement or other international instrument under the Constitution of the World Health Organization to strengthen pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. The WHO website goes on to confirm the following. The Health Assembly met in a special session, the second ever since WHO's founding in 1948, and adopted a sole decision titled The World Together. The decision by the Assembly establishes an intergovernmental negotiating body to draft and negotiate a WHO convention, agreement or other international instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, with a view to adopting under Article 19 of the WHO Convention or other provisions of the Constitution as may be deemed necessary by the INB. Under the decision adopted today, the INB will hold its first meeting by the 1st of March 2022 to agree on ways of working and timelines, and its second by the 1st of August 2022 to discuss progress on a working draft. It will also hold public hearings to inform its deliberations, deliver a progress report to the 76th World Health Assembly in 2023, and submit its outcome for consideration by the 77th World Health Assembly in 2024. The European Council goes on to state, an international convention, agreement or other international instrument on pandemics would support and focus on early detection and prevention of pandemics, resilience to future pandemics, response to any future pandemics, in particular by ensuring universal and equitable access to medical solutions such as vaccines, medicines and diagnostics. A stronger international health framework with the WHO as the coordinating authority on global health matters. The One Health approach connecting the health of humans, animals and our planet. According to the European Council, whatever convention, agreement or other international instrument is agreed upon would be legally binding under international law. The European Council also states that the proposal will be guided by a spirit of collective solidarity. Make no mistake, the term collective solidarity quite simply means the common good. Collective solidarity means that a small group of elite politicians and leaders will forcefully decide what is best for us all, and anyone with such a mindset will never be persuaded otherwise and will always be a danger to individual freedom. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the term the common good has been weaponised to coerce individuals to give up their freedom. Be under no illusion that our politicians have used this term as a tool of manipulation to push every totalitarian law they wanted through the Dáil over the past 2 years with little or no opposition. After the 1st of March 2022 meeting, we will have a better idea of the timetable around the publication of this pandemic response plan, and this will allow us to initiate a coordinated attack both at an Irish and EU member state level. Suffice to say, there is a global agenda afoot to put in place a pandemic response plan that would likely be legally binding on Ireland into the future and would see the rights of the individual sacrificed for some politicians' definition of the common good. The positive to take from this news is that for once we have time on our hands to coordinate and proactively manage this process. We will bring you more information on this once it becomes available. Finally, please see the link in the description box of this video where you will find template letters that you can use to lobby both TDs and Irish MEPs. We are asking you to please support and share this campaign. Thanks for listening.